In part one of this series, we looked at CSST programs and the ability to create both participation and enrollment records in those programs and scheduled instances of those programs. In part two, we looked at the way that in the client's form, in the client details page with the program eligibility and participation mover list, you can create both participation records and enrollment records with the appropriate system constant settings turned on. Now in part three, we want to take a look at what you can do with scheduled instances of programs in the service delivery form. So let's pull that up. And the associated program field is this drop-down list down at the lower left corner of the service details page in service delivery. So if we start from scratch, let's add a new record, service delivery. We'll pick somebody to add the record for, just at random. And we have a new record. You can fill in all of these other fields having to do with the category and the subcategory type, method, result, so on and so forth. But the key point here is to take a look at the ability to add an associated program. Now the contents of this list are the contents of the details page of the program's form, meaning those scheduled instances of programs that appear on that page. The list of those programs that is included in this drop-down can be altered by using this little button here that we call the filter button. The default setting is something that you can set yourself. But the settings when you click it are 5 years, which means that you're going to see all programs with a start date within the last 5 years. Click it again, it goes to 2 years, in which case you're seeing all programs with start within the last 2 years. Click it again, it goes to all, and that does exactly what it implies. It will show you every program listing ever created on the program details, the program instance listing on the program details page of the programs form. Or you can click it to FIL, which is short for filter, and that small button, and you can create custom filters. And we'll talk about how to go about doing that in another video clip in this series. So let's set it to all so that we're seeing everything that's available here. And then just choose one of the programs that we just created in the earlier clips, which was the Utility Assistance Program. And so we now have a service delivery record, which can be about just about anything that you can dream up in terms of what the service is that was being offered to this client on this particular date. And we've linked it to that particular scheduled instance of the program. When we click Save, we will get a pop-up asking for the creation of an enrollment record. Now we've already created the service delivery record, but now we're saying, do we want, since we've linked this client through the service delivery record to this scheduled instance of this program, do we also want an enrollment record for that client? And the enrollment pop-up here works exactly the same way as it did in the client's form, in that you have the choice. If there is more than one scheduled instance of this program, it will be shown in this drop-down. You have the choice of changing the start and the end date for the client enrollment, not for the program start and end, but for this particular client's participation, or I should use the term enrollment here since that's what we're talking about in CSST terms. The client's enrollment in this program. Client started on such and such a date, which again will default to today's date. The end date will default to the end date as it's entered for the program itself. The start date will always be the later of either the program start date or today's date on the day that you create the record. So we say OK, and this other pop-up is asking if we want to change the client status because it's not active at this point, and it's assuming that since we created this enrollment record that it probably should be, so we'll say yes. The ability to do all of these things in the service delivery form is controlled again by system constant settings. So if we pull up the category codes form again and recall that that's from administration, category codes, and then we want to go to constant. In the service delivery form, we want to look for the system constant SDADEN, service delivery add enrollment record, and you see that the system constant value here is set to true. If it were set to false, then that enrollment record pop-up that we just saw would not come up, and in fact no enrollment record would be created. So if you don't want that feature active, then you would change this system constant setting to read either false or no, so that it turns that feature off completely. There's two other system constants that also affect it. The next one is CHENSD. You see check enrollment user prompt in the service delivery form. So if the first system constant setting is turned on, then that turns on the ability to create enrollment records. This one determines whether the user will be prompted with that pop-up that came up, where you have the ability to change the client's start and end dates. If this system constant is set to false, then the enrollment record will be created automatically, and it will use the default dates, the start date being either the start date of the program or today's date, whichever is later, the end date being the end date of the program, and that client enrollment record will be created automatically without any prompt to the user. The third system constant then is SDEUOV, which is simply service delivery form user override of the check enrollment record prompt. So if the user checks the don't show me this prompt again checkbox, then they can turn it off on their own volition, and the record creation then for subsequent service delivery entries would be the enrollment record creation, I should say, for all subsequent service delivery entries would be automatic. This system constant setting simply says, do we allow the user to override to override in that manner by checking that checkbox? And if this is set to true, they have that ability. If it's set to false, they don't. And they would not be able to, in other words, the prompt would come up every time, regardless, assuming that it's turned on.